Gwen the Potter from the Kingdom of Ontir in the Bearing of Dragon's Lair. Today I'm doing a demo on how to throw a medievally inspired jug with a pie foot. These jugs were used extensively all through Europe and Britain throughout the Middle Ages. Here are several paintings and illustrations by medieval artists, which show representations of different kinds of jugs with the pie foot. And here are some photos of extant examples from various museums. Here's one of the jugs that I've made. It's a nice large jug, suitable for storing liquids or even dry goods. I could use a piece of waxed linen or even a large cork to seal it. The pie foot is mostly a decorative aspect, although it can keep the jug from tipping on an uneven surface. See that the pie foot is created by just pinching the clay at the foot with the thumb and the forefinger. These are actual shards from a drowned village called Valkenes in the Netherlands. The shards date no later than 1400 and show clearly the pie foot base. Here are the various tools that I use for throwing. Sponges, needle tool, wooden knives, ribs, wire tool, and various looped tools for trimming. Clay is composed of earthy material and silicates. While it's being formed, it creates platelets, and the platelets in the clay are all over the place. So what we need to do to line up the platelets to make it easier to throw with is wedge the clay. Wedging also removes air bubbles in the clay, so that also makes it easier to throw and helps you when you're trying to center it. It's really difficult to center a piece of clay that has a bunch of air bubbles in it. Plus, air bubbles left in a vessel could cause thermal trimming in the kiln, which is when an air pocket gets heated up and expands while it's being fired, and the clay could flake off, or it could cause a mini explosion in the kiln. So we don't want that, so we wedge. Okay, wedging is just a matter of pushing the clay in on itself to get rid of air bubbles and to line it up. In this particular wedging style, I'm pushing only on one side, and my other hand is just steadying it. When I'm done wedging, you see the reason it's called wedging is it kind of looks like a wedge when it's actually a cone. But at the bottom of the cone, you have these spirals that we have to get rid of because they will trap air once I slam it onto the wheel head. So I push the clay in on itself to remove any air pockets to keep it from trapping the air. Pushing from the outside to the inside so that you're pushing the air out as you go. And I smooth it and end up with a nice cone of clay with a rounded bottom, nice and smooth, ready for me to throw on the wheel head. Now we're ready to start throwing. Now that the clay is wedged and all the wrinkles have been sealed up, we are ready to throw. The act of making a pot on a wheel is called throwing. The term to throw comes from an Old English word, throwen, which means to twist or turn. The bottom of the wedge of clay needs to be rounded in order to adhere properly to the wheel head. I smack the clay onto the wheel head and then tamp around it to ensure that the clay does not shift when I start sintering. Sintering is a process of forcing the clay on the wheel head into the middle. Without sintering, it is really difficult to form a pot. I use my whole body when sintering, because if you just use your hands, the clay will push you around. I triangulate with my elbows firmly into my sides, and I push against the clay with my entire body. After sintering, I open the clay up with my hand, again triangulating for the most strength and control. I don't move too fast. You always move just as fast as your wheel is turning to avoid torque. I go a bit slower when opening, and even slower when forming the vessel. I make several passes to get to the height that I need, pulling the clay from the bottom to the top. I exert a lot of pressure on the bottom, but let off the pressure as I near the top, where the clay is not as thick and is more delicate. The wheel is going pretty slow at this point, and this is not the time to rush. It is easy to get the clay off center by going too fast. Make sure there's no water standing in the bottom. Now that I have the height, I can start shaping by pushing on the inside with a rib and finishing on the outside with my hands. Then, after I get the shape close to what I'm looking for, I collar the neck in. My hands need to be very wet so that they don't stick as I push the vessel neck back into the center. This process makes the walls thicker, and I will go back in and pull more clay up to make a longer neck. When the rim gets too uneven, I will use a needle tool to cut the top off and even it out. and continue collaring the neck in until I get the diameter where I want it, and then use the needle tool again to even the rim. Here I do another pull to make the rim thinner, because it became thicker as I collared it in. One last trim before forming the rim. This pot has a folded over rim to give it strength and to mimic the look of the pots in period. I pull the top of the rim thinner and then fold it over onto itself, making sure it is very wet when I fold, and that I fold from the top to the bottom so that no air bubbles are caught in the fold. Then I do a little more shaping of the neck, and the pot's just about ready. I'll use a rib to scrape off excess clay and water on the sides so that I don't have drips. It also aids in additional shaping. Then, using a wooden knife, I create a channel at the base of the vessel and run a wire tool against the wheel head. Using the wire tool is just about the only way to remove clay from a surface. Then I'll pry the entire bat off the wheel head, set the pot aside to dry until it is leather hard. Leather hard resembles the texture of leather, and it is at this stage it can be trimmed. To trim the jug, I use a modern implement called a Giffen grip, which automatically centers the pot onto the wheel. I have my electric assist kick wheel set up to do trimming most of the time. I choose the proper length of pins for the height of the vessel, place them in the sliders, and put the pot on the wheel head upside down. After tightening the pins, which centers the pot, I can begin trimming. You have to be careful with tall pots. It's easy to throw them off center. As you can see, I threw it off, so I have to recenter it. Still not quite there. I tap on the pot to listen to it, gives me an indication of how thick it is so that I know how much to trim off. Pots in the Middle Ages were not necessarily trimmed. They, for the most part, were thrown to the thickness they needed to be. This one is close, I just need to take a little bit off before forming the foot. I use a loop tool to remove the excess clay. This pot is just at the right dryness, and the clay comes off in continuous strips. This is also an opportunity to do more shaping as I go. Now that it's trimmed, I can do the pie foot by pinching the clay together around the bottom. I have to make sure that to leave enough at the bottom in order to do this. The last step is to make and apply handles. I wedge up just a bit of clay to form a little loop handle for this pot. After wedging, I slam it against the work surface, pulling it into an elongated shape. Then, using water or slip, I hold the lug of clay in one hand and pull the clay with the other, using plenty of liquid. By turning the clay, I can form the shape I want for the handle. The trick is to use a smooth movement to get a nice even handle. I always do more than one to give me an extra in case I screw it up. Now I'll need a little bit of slip, which is water and clay mixed together. I use the same clay that I'm working with so that it dries to the right color and consistency. And take the pot and determine where the handle will be placed. And I'll score those places with the needle tool. Usually it's attached one end on the rim and one on the shoulder of the jug. After scoring, you apply slip. The point of applying the slip is to enable a good weld between the wet handle and the leather-hard pot. cut the handle to length. Flatten out the end that's going to get attached to the rim, and then apply it firmly to the top. And then the bottom. After it's applied, I'll smooth out the clay and do a little shaping of the handle. And to make sure that the weld is very secure so it doesn't pop off of the pot during firing. Finally, just a bit of cleanup, and the pot is done, ready to dry and then to glaze if preferred.